Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is a special edition from ZohoDay 2025. We're somewhere outside of Austin at a very nice resort. And I'm joined again, thank you for coming on the show again, by Raju. You did a show with me last summer, and we got to talk a lot about what you guys have done. And since then, a lot of different changes have happened, so I'm excited to kind of dig into that. But why don't you start, since I'll probably have a new viewer or two, I hope. Do a quick introduction and just tell them a little bit about what you do at Zoho.
I'm Raju Vegesna. I work with the product teams and the market teams, and that means including customers, and try to find the right solutions for the customer problems, and that's the role I take. We don't give too much importance to titles in the company, but it's about being the bridge.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you're right, it is funny because titles at Zoho are not like that thing. It's more about initiative and what you do, right? So.
And we tend to do what we enjoy, and that's a long-term approach.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's definitely a different approach than a lot of companies. So one of the, Sridhar, your former CEO, now chief scientist, started the day by talking a little bit about what he's doing and where he's gone. And since that's directly related to AI, I thought it'd be interesting if you could just tell us a little bit about the change and what he's focused on, what the company is focused, and how you guys have changed strategically over the last year.
So broadly, I mean, if you zoom out a little bit, as a company, we have navigated certain shifts in the past. If you go back to late 90s, our CEO back then was Tony. And Sridhar, we noticed a shift where we were serving the telecom industry as the market is shifting towards other things. So Tony convinced Sridhar to take it over and say, hey, this is the new direction. Right. So Sridhar took it over. And we were doing installed products. And then around 2005, we had another shift. Said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board, take a look at it, because this is going to change the market. And then that moved us into a different shift. Similarly, 2008-ish, the mobile thing, there was another shift. And now we are seeing the AI, we sense a different shift. That means we have to align ourselves a little bit so that we suspect this is going to be a bigger shift, or maybe on par with some of the previous shifts. Along with such shifts comes focus areas and all of that. There are some that have to focus deep on the technology, deep on the products, some various other categories. So we sense a shift. So we are realigning ourselves to do well in this upcoming shift. It's not going to happen in a year or two, this AI thing. It's just getting started. It'll probably take maybe 5 years, maybe a decade or so for it to really play out and get to real business models. Yeah. But because of that shift, we recognize the need to, morph ourselves for this new age.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I know Sridhar's been really excited about how this changes the developer role and coding and all those things. So having him focus as a chief scientist, I guess that really does click with, where he's been focused really for a while.
Actually, for the last, 20, 25 years, he has been focusing on developer productivity. End of the day, productivity is a key thing that, as a business owner, you got to do that. And particularly developer productivity has been his passion area. Even he's the creators of our creator application, which now has about 5+ million applications. Right. He created the language in there, focusing on developer productivity. Yep. So that has been his passion area. And now developer productivity, when combined with AI, it takes it to another level. So that is where he's going to dig deep into.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And you can tell he has a lot of passion for it. The presentation was fantastic, and a lot of energy, which, he always has a lot of energy, but around this topic,
he's not deep into the weeds.
So one of the things you talked about in your presentation this morning really falls in line with what is the hot topic for 2025, right? And I've been writing a lot about it. A lot of people have. We've been talking about it. But agentic AI is really kind of over the last 6 months or so, burst onto the scene as a significant opportunity for businesses, although, as you say, we're very early. But one of the things you talked about that I think would be really useful for the audience to understand is how you guys have approached this. You had an assistant already, Zia, and you had a lot of machine learning algorithms that you've had in the product for a long time. But with the addition of LLMs, large language models, and with the shift to more of an agentic approach, in other words, some agent that has some agency to take action for you, that changes things. So how are you guys thinking about this, and where are you going?
Generally, if you zoom out a little bit, when a new ingredient is available, it enables various other recipes possible.
Sure.
And when LLM became available to the world of applications, that enabled new scenarios. But LLMs had a drawback, which is they had to be grounded in the latest and greatest information.
Right.
So that's where you need some kind of a tool to keep the LLMs current. And that gave birth to agentic, and that opened a completely new dimension. And yet another ingredient became available to the existing ingredients along with LLMs.
Sure.
Now that is enabling lots of use cases. Typically, when something is introduced, it kind of goes crazy, but it's explosion of innovation. But the reality sinks in and comes down to ground reality. Where now for everything is a agentic thing, but in reality, there is a good use for it. And we have to figure out what the real use is, where the value is. It is possible that there are going to be new ingredients available like that in upcoming quarters and months. But for now, agentic provides and opens up new use cases.
Sure.
And that is what is exciting. And between last year and now, that is what changed. I'm confident there will be more changes coming. Yeah. But like, for example, apart from LLM, the reasoning engine is a key thing, and reasoning engine combined with agentic makes a very interesting use cases, particularly for businesses.
Yeah, and really the fact that they already were using Zia to do certain things. I mean, you can ask questions and have it look for information and that sort of thing. But now with agents available, they can actually take that next step and have it do some things for you, and then of course some things you want the human to do.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So what kind of use cases do you see as kind of the first ones that your customers are trying?
The example I talked about with a service provider, where you send out an email saying that, hey, my internet connection is down. We have been there.
Yeah.
Send a message, right? And can an agent understand that and use one of its tools to check the status of the modem to see if it is reachable? If the modem is reachable, that means the internet connection is fine. Something is wrong with the customer side. Maybe suggest to the customer that, hey, did you try restarting it? And all of that based on the interaction, the agent can automatically interact. But the tool that is created that most of the service providers do have to check the status of the modem, it can automatically be done. So a good number of these use cases can be addressed right there. So that is one of those deployments. But we are also seeing a lot of other use cases as well. We use it internally, and of course we have seen some of our customers use it for ticket routing. Yeah. Whether it is customer ticket routing or even legal routing. We have some deployment where legal teams, based on the kind of requests, they assign the ticket to the appropriate legal person based on the historical skills and all of those, and the region and various other factors. Sure. So otherwise, somebody has to manually locate it now and go through that. So things like that. We have deployed several agents internally, but even externally, we are seeing a few. And we also deployed the RFP agent, where we get to fill in a lot of RFPs, but we have a library of, say, hundreds, if not thousands of RFPs pre-filled.
I mean, after all the years you've been doing this, right?
Exactly. And some of these in multiple languages. Throw an agent at it and say, hey, here is the new RFP. And now, can we use all the library of existing RFPs we have filled? And can an agent help us fill the RFP and get us them started? Sure. And that's a use case. And good news is we also do a word processor. We also have our own PDF engine, all of that. Now we pulled all of these together and put together an agent. At some point, we're going to be launching it externally as well. But these are all internal deployments. We are also seeing customers deploy some of these.
Interesting. Well, underneath this, and I've seen a couple other presentations this morning that start to talk about how you've shifted a bit. And and this is related to the AI, I think, a lot. So the idea that you move from these specific little applications, lots of them, to more of a platform approach, and you want to enable developers and non-developers to do different activities and build out different custom type activities in there, right?
Increasingly, because of the scope of industries and the customer sizes we do, each industry requires a different variety and all of that, and different customization, all of that. So what initially started as an individual product had to become a platform to enable lots of customizations. That doesn't apply for a lot of those, but if you're doing an electronic signature, it doesn't have to be a platform. But if you need something like a CRM system or other complex systems, then it has to be a platform because you have to address the needs of various industries. So some of these evolved as platforms, and that the other products, individual products, plug into the platform as well. If somebody wants to use each of these as individual products, they are available. But if they want to customize it, there are tools available to customize it as well. Because of the broad scope of industries and customization needed, it is we had to do this. In fact, we launched something called CRM for everyone, where the way you want to see customer information as a salesperson is different from a marketing person, is different from your legal team because they want to see the contracts and all of that, is different from your accounts receivables team and all of that. Just within the same company, the requirements and how they want to visualize is different. So you cannot use the same interface and say, hey, go use it. So we had to make it a platform so that the customers can customize it for their needs.
That makes sense. And I think, you bring up an interesting kind of shift overall, this idea of getting specific to me or personalized or a view into what I do based around what I want the system to do to support me. And some of that's the LLM-based ability to have conversations with data, right? I mean, that's one of the big shifts.
Totally. Data is a key, but permission layer, respecting permission layer is an important piece. Because you cannot look data itself as a silo and say, okay, that'll solve all my problems. Data with the appropriate permissions layered, and then bring in the context that gives in the real value.
And that also ties directly into this concept of trust and building trust into the system.
Trust into the system, because you have to have audit trails and all of that. Just like in self-driving, if you're speeding and you cannot say, hey, it's my autopilot. That is,
well, I can try, but
exactly. So just like you violate, you're not compliant to a certain system, you cannot blame it on AI. You need the systems, you have the responsibility, and the governance part of it has to be in place. So that's why we have to treat it at a certain level, and we take those seriously.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would imagine that from a customer perspective, then you really could accelerate productivity a lot because of that personalized.
Absolutely. We have to keep it grounded too. There is a theory and then there is a practice. Today, are we seeing 10x productivity? No. At least not based on
not for most.
Not for most. We can make claims, but the reality is it is measured in percentages. So we are seeing 10% in some cases, 70%, 80% in some cases. But I think because we are still in the early phases of this, and we are confident that we can get to 10x. Particularly developer productivity, we are confident we can get to 10x because we know what that means and we know how to get there too. But in other cases, I'm confident that let's say a few years from now we're going to be measuring it in multiples. For now, it's measured in percentages.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. And as your customers start to move into this more and more, I mean there are more things available and shift there, so that's logical. But underneath this, we talk about LLMs a lot, and then also from an agentic perspective, the ability for you to connect out into other things, right? Because if I want something to do stuff for me, or if I want to use a language model, maybe I need a small one because I'm running it locally, or maybe I need large, or maybe I need public, or I want open source, or all these different things. Right? So how do you guys think about that? I mean, how are you enabling your customers to go about that?
In a B2B scenario, about 80 to 90% of the cases you don't need an LLM. You can live with a narrow or maximum maybe a mid-size model. You don't need an LLM. LLM is needed in very specific cases. So that's why both the narrow models, small models, medium models, they are also at play. We continue to invest in it. When the large models infrastructure requirements come down, which we are seeing with DeepSeek and Quen and all of those, now you can start to use them more, but it's always a balance between the value and the compute and the cost and all of those. So that's where it is a balance, and it's always a contextual balance. For example, if you get let's say submit a simple expense receipt, for most of these receipts, you can pretty much be done with a simple small model or a narrow model. But for a complex one, okay, for that you determine that it is a complex and you're going to use an LLM. It is all contextual, and it's important to have all the tools in the toolbox. And we do have all of those tools because of all the historical investment. But you cannot throw LLM at this problem because your compute cost gets expensive. And we are figuring out how best to not raise our prices to our customers so that we can continue to deliver value. So it is always a balance at the back end.
I know we talked a little bit about that last year, but that's one of the unique things about Zoho, and I know a couple of other vendors are doing this too, but most charge tokens or some new usage-based model on top, right? But you guys haven't done that. Why?
Because we own our infrastructure. About 98% of the vendors probably do not have their own compute. And if you take something like search is a very simple but very complex.
It sounds simple.
But if you're searching organizational data across the board, you have to index all that data. There is a search within an application which is straightforward. When you span across the organization, across data, their offline data beyond Zoho and all of that, it's a complex thing.
It is.
To give you an idea, probably, just take an analytics or search system. We touch about 6 to 7 petabytes of data every day, roughly. Imagine us running on a third-party cloud. We're going to be charged for that.
Yikes.
We offer it for free because we own the infrastructure. So we are not into maximizing revenue business. We are not using the technology to charge more. But for us, this is yet another innovation that will enable developer productivity, where a tool is becoming a power tool, and all tools will be power tools, and that's the baseline now. And we think people will not be willing to pay more.
Well, and you mentioned search, so I know Ask Zia is a part of this, and that was a product that has existed inside of Zoho for a while, but that's shifting too, right?
It's shifting. Now it's getting the agentic capabilities as well. Ask Zia was primarily search plus getting all that information within the org. Now we are adding that agentic layer on top of it, and then the LLM layer on top of it. Between the two, it gains new skills.
Interesting. We hear a lot about a lot of hype and then also just a lot of pushback around the language models hallucinate and can you really trust the outcome and that sort of thing. How are you approaching that? How do you help your customers realize that they can trust this and they can use their data safely?
That is the core use cases, and the context really matters. You can give some of these large models your specific data. Hey, here are my tickets. Can you summarize it?
Sure.
Here is a legal document that I received. Can you just look up all my thousands of legal documents I've signed in the last, say, 10 years and see if it deviates from any of the clauses that I've signed in the past? It's tough that's something a large language model can do. Obviously, you're not going to host that large language model and push all your thousands of documents in there. We do not believe in that. That's why we host a large language model in our data center and restrict it for the customer's use case, for their own data, respecting their privacy. Now they get evaluated. So as long as the guardrails are in place, then you're in a good shape. And it's important to keep those guardrails in place and provide the key to the customer and let them control what they want to provide.
Well, and I mean, you hit on that. I think one of the most important drivers from a customer perspective is to think about the use case and then go at the problem because of the use case. So that will drive whether it's a local model, an open source, or, whatever, right? Your choices are driven by what you want out of it, not by what I have available, which is a different way of thinking.
It's a different way because at the end of the day, it comes down to that. What do the customer want to get? Sure. Some cases we sit with them and discuss some scenarios, and they come up with some innovative ideas and say, "Hey, I want to try this in my case," and those are interesting, and those are all on a case by case basis.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we talk about like a lot of capabilities and a lot of change, and that's exciting. But as a customer, what are the things they should think about? What are the challenges that they're going to face in moving into this agentic future? And what are you guys doing to help them?
One thing, realize that this is early technology and it is changing fast, almost on a weekly basis.
Yes, it is.
and there's no point. It's not like they're missing anything right away, but it's good to keep an eye on what are the technologies that are available and what they can leverage.
Sure.
Some cases and some businesses in some industries they can leverage right away. In others, it's a stretch. But what is important is you need the foundation in a good shape before you can build a house.
Sure.
So it's important that they have all the foundation in a good shape, meaning their data connected, making sure that, like if you have garbage in, garbage out. So make sure that the digital infrastructure they have built, whether the application, data, BI, a lot of cases, business intelligence and the data there becomes the base for AI. Yeah. So you need the BI layer in a good shape so that and the permission layer in a good shape so that AI can further help them. If you put in an AI system where you don't have all of this in place and permissions and data in a good shape, you're going to get mess and it'll accelerate the problem. And so that is where laying the right foundation digitally becomes an important aspect.
Yeah. So I mean, that's an interesting thought process for a business to work through, right? Do I have the data? Do I have the quality of the data? Can I aggregate the data? Is there a way then that I can define these use cases and use your technology in each of those specific? But each one's a project, right? It's a unique thing, and you have to think through it that way.
Think through it, and because if you put an AI in there, AI will find the data that you do not want it to find too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So you better have it until lockdown.
Yeah. Actually, I've already had that too. That's good. So if you're talking to an executive in one of your customers, what advice do you give them? They're asking about AI. What do you tell them? What should they be doing? What should they be thinking about right now?
Yeah, solving their internal problems first. What is the thing that is bothering you?
Yeah.
See, a technology can help you out. AI is the new hammer. That doesn't mean AI is needed.
It doesn't mean you're a nail.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
But assess it, see if AI plays a role, great. If not, still you got to focus on that. But in general, having a good discussion between a technology vendor who's deep into AI and then the CIO or the business owner who knows their business, collaborating and discussing what we have noticed based on our historical discussions. Sure. That interactions is generating a lot more ideas. It's like a coffee shop where sit in the room, discuss about various things and say, hey, maybe we can help you this way. Maybe it is helpful in another way. We are uncovering a lot of interesting scenarios that way. That's why we put together teams that sit with now executives and see how we can solve the problems. And they are also looking, hey, they say, we are hearing a lot about AI. Should we even think about it?
Right.
They say, hey, tell us what your challenges are and let's have conversations. Yeah. And based on that, we are doing it. In fact, we have done it with some banking customers where the biggest thing we were able to address is fraud detection. We were able to come up with some good fraud detection algorithms and scenarios. Nice. And this is for our own transaction because we do the payment systems and all of that. We were able to come up with some interesting models. Casually, we are saying, hey, we were talking to some of the banks, and banks said, hey, can we use the technology? We did a test run. It turns out our models are better than some of their models. So we had to deploy these models in the casual conversations that have come up. Yeah. There are other cases where some highly, I would say, sensible organizations where data leak is a prevention thing.
Sure.
We have some AI algorithms that detect leaks, meaning somebody takes a photo of their screen and then leaks it publicly, we can identify who that person is.
Interesting.
And somebody takes a photo of the screen and says, hey, and leaks that information publicly, we have a way to identify those. Now, we said that, and they found it extremely helpful and they wanted to adopt it.
Yeah.
So, but the conversations come in, but like that, we have built a lot of models and a lot of capabilities. Now, apply that to a different context, it's helpful. But it is the conversations that is enabling these scenarios.
So, but it's and it's a contextual conversation around a use case or a problem. Right?
Totally.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have, Raju. I really appreciate you joining me again.
Oh,
Great discussion. I really
thank you for coming again and appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and welcome to round 2 of the ZohoDay interviews. We talked to Raju earlier, and now we get the pleasure of talking to Anand Nergunam. And you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do. That would be helpful.
Yeah, great. So thanks for inviting us. Thanks for joining us at ZohoDay. I focus on all things revenue from a growth perspective. That includes our marketplace, strategic partnerships, cross-sell and upsell to existing customers, plus verticals. Big growth momentum we believe is coming from verticals. So that's what I focus largely on.
Cool. And you did a nice presentation earlier that really helped me kind of get my my mind around what you're doing and how you're approaching things. So that's good. And I want to talk about kind of both halves of what you talked about this morning. One, the move more aggressively into the enterprise. I shouldn't say the move into enterprise because you've had enterprise customers for a long time, but you can tell there's definitely more of a strategy around it.
Yeah.
And then secondly, and I think this is a really interesting place too, around verticals, and we'll get there in a minute to talk about it. But one of the things I wanted to say when I was listening to you earlier, and I was thinking about this, is that for years we've had horizontal CRM players go vertical, or horizontal ERP players go vertical, and often vertical has meant more of slideware and things on your website than it necessarily did with the product. And I don't mean that's a bad thing. It's just that some templates and that sort of thing doesn't give you a deep vertical solution. And what you're talking about is a little different. Well, actually a lot different than that.
Yeah.
So as we go through this, we'll dig into that a little bit more too. But I was just real impressed with the fact that immediately you start talking about how you build these custom apps, how your partners do, and those sorts of things. So I think that's different and it's exciting. So.
And that's the difference from a value perspective for a customer.
Yeah.
You can kind of sign up small customizations and start to use a vertical specific app, and that's the value, right?
Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. All right, so let's just jump into it a little bit, and we talked a lot earlier, Raju, about where things have evolved from an AI standpoint, but obviously, agentic AI, particularly as we talk about the enterprise. That's probably the hottest topic of anything this year, right? I mean, it has certainly. Takes over my news feed often anyway. So how do you think about that in the context of what you're doing with the enterprise and how AI can really help you grow and build that customer relationship in the enterprise?
I think what is important is, for long, as you said, there has been talk about AI, but can it be contextual? Can this kind of help customers move forward in terms of delivering great customer experiences? Can this improve the support agent to deliver value? That's where the agentic AI comes into play, where we can kind of create a digital assistant or a digital colleague for these people on the sales or on the support side to be able to deliver value, where it can kind of do 10x of what maybe 100x in terms of speed on what it can deliver. And so therefore the experiences could be really personalized, faster, and then more authentic because it comes from your own data and not a general perception through public data. That's the difference we see. That's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know trust is a big topic when you think about AI. data, and particularly when you talk about the enterprise and the data and the vast amount of data that they have today. So how does Zoho think about trust, especially when we're talking to an enterprise customer? How do you explain that to them?
Great question. So when we talk to customers, it's them who decide when and how deep they want to go with AI. There are some listed companies who are our customers, and they are like, hey, the last thing I want is in the front paper of Financial Times that,
Right.
This is
that's publicity we don't want.
Exactly. So that's not what we want. So
Exactly.
It's been always a measured approach where the customer says, hey, this sounds more secure. This is something that I'm comfortable with, a RAG approach, not like moving your data elsewhere. That's the approach that they are comfortable with. And we allow them to lead with their comfort on how far and deep. For example, we didn't want to simply plug into a Gen AI and allow the customer to do whatever they want. We have been putting some guardrails to say, hey, this is the data you're moving. Are you sure you want to do that?
Right.
You could ask for a summarization. That's much simpler. You don't want them to look at your data and predict when the churn, but that means you're going to send a host of customer data elsewhere. So we allow them to take that call and we facilitate. And that, I think, something that Zoho has been privacy-centric for many years, for decades, and we want to live up to that value.
Sure.
I think a great example is what Apple does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I mean, I know through the years of talking with Zoho and when I was in Chennai, we get to see all the different departments and that sort of thing. And it's really interesting how committed that Zoho's been to privacy and security. Right. Yeah. So when we introduce AI, that obviously is a new element, and particularly when you're talking large language models, publicly available large language models, and then of course open source and locally run. So how, and you mentioned RAG, so retrieval augmented generation obviously plays a part of your strategy to help keep that company data isolated from the rest of the LLM, whatever you're using system, right? So how are you actually thinking about that? How do you do that in Zoho? How's it set up? Because RAG obviously can be done a few different ways, so I'm just curious.
So, no, I think I'm not an expert in this.
No,
but I would say the way we are looking at is we can build an agent that would be able to take a question and then look at our unified data layer that is specific to an instance.
Right.
Okay. Like for example, we are not thinking of taking the query of a customer, applying on top of all the data that Zoho has across customers to give an answer.
Right.
Or, it works two ways. You don't want, let's say I'm a customer, I don't want my data to be used by someone else and vice versa. So we've been careful to say, build a unified data layer. If needed, data could flow in from other ecosystems into this layer. But then the RAG works specific to that customer and that instance. And that way we want to be sure that it's specific, but at the same time, it's not overly exposed to someone else.
Well, and you keep it isolated then from any other instance, but also from the language models themselves, which could learn from that if they were exposed, right? Yeah, interesting. So that is, I mean, that seems like a very easy way to explain to the customer too, which is obviously, something that you want when you're selling in the enterprise particularly. Let's talk about verticals a little bit, because verticals is a little different, and I sort of set that up a little bit up front that, when you think of verticals, a vertical may need a CRM system, and a lot of the functionality in the CRM system works no matter where you are. But at the same time, there are things that are different for a bank than for a window supplier, for example. So how's the strategy, and then how does the strategy incorporate AI into it to make it a more powerful message for those vertical customers?
Great question. See, we are focusing on financial services as one segment, as a vertical, right? Now, when we build capabilities, say a know your customer or a churn prediction, our models for AI models are tailored to what happens in this context of a customer and the industry they are in. So a churn prediction for, let's say, a financial services customer is very different from, let's say, an automotive customer. Right? So, or a telco. Now, there are generic AI models, then there are specific models for a vertical. So our AI strategy is, can I build a churn prediction for financial services sector?
Right.
And can that be part of the platform that goes in? That's where the specificity comes in, right? So that's our focus, to see how we can pick and choose verticals where we think it's a big play for us to go and invest, learn, build a platform, and then bake in the capability of AI to be able to deliver superior experiences. And so that's where it gets.
Yeah, so you guys think of it a little bit differently when you say platform than perhaps some of the providers define it. You know, some providers talk about a platform, and the truth is you guys don't think of it that way. You think of each of those, what used to be applications but have grown significantly in capability, as a platform.
Yeah.
And then everything is integrated together across this data layer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That it's good to think of it that way, because I don't know that everybody would immediately go to that model.
Trust
right?
me, we had a lot of back and forth. That's the value we bring. So I want to be a platform, but I don't want to throw a kitchen sink of a generic platform at a customer and say, go figure out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if I have to do the last 30%, which is tailored to my strategy, my customer base, my competitive situation, that's great. If we say 20% is out of the box, 80% you go figure out.
Yeah.
That's not true.
That's not good.
Yeah.
No. And I grew up in this industry in professional services originally for vendors. And, we used to tell customers, we're like 75% and only 25% is custom. But we all knew we were more like 25% and 75% was going to be custom to make it match, right?
Yeah.
So having the capability to explain it in a way and then show them where the extension is versus having to build everything out is a much more manageable way forward. Yeah. So you're also involved in partners, and I know you've had partners for years, but there is an effort to expand that quite a bit now too, right? So obviously AI is moving really quickly, and some of the partners are really focused around very specific verticals. How do you help them use your tools to do those types of custom solutions?
Great question. We're going to do a demo tomorrow.
Oh, good.
A live demo where we have Ask Zia, which is our agentic one. So I want to build a vertical for, let's say, shipping companies, logistics companies. We are working on a command-based prompt. Let's say, hey, I'm looking to build a CRM for shipping and logistics company.
Interesting.
It uses the power of GenAI.
Right.
Then it creates modules, which comes in as 3 minutes, you will have 5 modules. If you are a shipping agency, you want to have ABC as the modules and predefined fields. So the partner who is working on a vertical with the domain expertise would know exactly what to give as a prompt. And the system would go use the power of GenAI, come back and say, in this industry, for this use case, I need these modules, these integrations, workflows. And that's going to come through a prompt. So that's the area we're focusing on.
So you're really leveraging the partner's expertise to prompt the system.
Exactly. Like today I was trying to do a prompt and we were doing something, but we're falling so short because we don't know the domain. Right? So where the partner comes from the domain, they know what to ask for. And GenAI tells them what is the norm. And then the model.
So you've got a language model, the foundation model that already has a lot of that data ingested and trained. Very interesting. That certainly takes advantage of the capabilities of the tool and the capabilities of the partner.
And then the AI, so it's a...
So we hit on a little bit about balancing the privacy piece, some security, but grounding the model, helping to get past this fear of hallucination. Because let's be honest, we've gone a long way from 2.5 years ago when we were really afraid of hallucinations. How do you think about that for those vertical customers, and then how how does that narrative go for them? How do you help them understand that hallucination is still a problem, but it's not the sort of thing that we were talking about 2 years ago when everybody was scared of the fact that the things just lie sometimes?
Yeah. No, I think, see, when it comes to a customer-specific use of AI, the scope is minimal. You're not going to ask Gen AI to predict what's going to be the future of a product you're launching.
You might, but...
It might hallucinate. If you're going to say, do you think this customer is going to churn? It has got access to so much data. How many times they've called and what is their sentiment when they wrote a mail? Okay, what's their NPS score?
Yeah.
It's not going to be, there is much less need for hallucination. There is good data.
Well, that's fair, right?
Yeah,
the data, the data quality's there, and the system's protected and yet has the right context.
Yeah. So they don't have to fear hallucination because it's good data, good context, and then it kind of helps.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you approach the enterprise, especially, they're looking for a variety of different proof of concept and trials and all that sort of thing. So if I'm an executive in one of your enterprise customers, talk me through that. How should I think about this? How should I approach not just the use of AI, although that's certainly a part of it, but also just think about how do I want to approach my relationship with Zoho and what should I think of first? What do I do? What do I do first? What do I do?
Great question. So the way we look at that is, come talk to us.
Yeah.
Let's get on a workshop to know what are your challenges, what are you looking for, whom are you trying to replace.
Yeah.
Then we will look at products. Then we'll look at platforms. So it's not, I bring in my catalog and say, hey, customer, please choose.
Here, choose some of these.
So it always starts with
That'd be
the problem.
scary.
Starts with the problem, understanding where they are, what level of digitization, what level of automation, AI. Then we can look at products. Then we take 2 weeks, do a POC, show it to them with their own data.
Okay.
That builds trust.
That's interesting. Yeah, that does build trust.
Then we bring in the business users and the IT teams within those customers and say, let's do together. Because the business team knows exactly what they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So
they do.
Yeah. So the customer said this afternoon, if you saw, 2 of the best sales guys were part of the decision process on what we want. That makes it more acceptable.
Yeah.
And the usability goes multiple.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like too you're leading into this use case driven concept too, right? So I want to, where are the most important use cases for you, and then let's approach those because you'll get the greatest value, and then that's a logical, and it is sort of a traditional enterprise approach, but with this type of system, particularly because you guys have so much functionality, it's even more important to think about it in that phased way. Yeah. So one thing that I've been thinking about a lot, and I did talk to Raju a little bit about it when we met earlier, is how AI is actually starting to change the way we use software. And this is my theory, but I'll share it because I'm curious what you think about it, right? Yeah. So my theory is that because we now have the LLMs give us the capability to interact naturally with things in ways that we were never able to do before. Yeah. So it seems to me that we're in the middle of a big shift from an application usage standpoint, UI standpoint, UX standpoint, and that over time we're really going to be using that AI as the UI layer for a lot of tasks because we're able to interact naturally. I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I think, one of the things that if I am a sales head and, I'm looking at what kind of requests for proposals came yesterday, and I want to say, hey, tell me the biggest request for proposals that came yesterday.
Right.
I could have gotten 250, but my attention is needed for 10.
Yeah.
They are big, they are important.
Yep.
And so that's the power it brings. Same way, a churn. If someone who manages like revenue for someone like me, it would be like, if this customer is going to churn, can you give me the set of customers that I should focus.
Right.
So that's the value, right?
Yeah.
So instead of us looking at a bunch of reports and graphs and then identifying
Dashboards and
yeah, now it's getting more actionable, specific, and that's the value.
I mean, that was my year. 2 years ago when I started using some of the AI tools, I eventually sort of found perplexity, and over a period of time, I went, well, "Why am I using Google to search for a way to find an answer when I could just find an answer?" Right?
My daughter wouldn't do it.
right. So I was, and so I think the same thing is kind of starting to evolve in my mind around how that happens in the enterprise, and particularly, dashboards. Dashboards always just frustrated me because they always told me just enough to ask another question. Yeah. And then didn't have the capability to get to the answer.
Yeah, but it has its value.
It
it's
does.
more like your, cars.
It's a signpost.
Yes, but is it actionable? That's where AI can add that more value.
Yeah, I don't need to know that I'm 10% below my number. I need to know that I'm 10% below my number in the southern region. Yeah. Right? And then what do I do to get out of it? Yeah, that's good. This is great, actually, and I really appreciate you joining me. A lot of interesting things happening here this year. So, I guess every year I come to these, I say that. But no, thanks very much, Anand. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
Bye.
great.
Bye.
Yeah, awesome.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arionresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arionresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arion Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.